Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Professor Hermanson, and as promised, this is another video intended to help you prepare for the MTEL Communication and Literacy Exam, which is an exam that is required for everyone who is pursuing teaching licensure to teach at public schools in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. I have another video that I will link below that goes into more depth about the nuts and bolts aspect of the test, registering for the test, how it's administered, how long it takes, all those kinds of questions. So check out that video if you need more information about this test. But this particular video and the other videos in this series are going to help prepare you for actually taking the communication and literacy test. So we're going to talk about the content of the test and some test preparation strategies. So just a little bit more information about me. Again, my name is Professor Hermanson. I am an assistant professor in the English department at Westfield State University in Westfield, Massachusetts. I've been in that position for about 5 years now, and I teach courses that are intended for our English education majors. So those are students who plan to teach English language arts at the middle school and high school levels in Massachusetts public and private institutions. And part of their preparation, of course, includes helping them prepare for the MTEL, or the Massachusetts Test for Educator Licensure. I'm also a member of the English Education Committee, so I help to make departmental decisions about curriculum and requirements within our program. So it's just a little bit about me. So let's talk about the actual MTEL exam and the Common Literacy Test, which is, of course, the focus of our video. So the Communication and Literacy Test, which I will call the Common Literacy Test from now on, is, again, required in tandem with whatever subject matter you plan to teach. This is required of everyone who plans to teach, right? Everyone who is teaching licensure, pursuing teaching licensure rather. So the Common Literacy Test is a computer-based test. It is an online proctored test. Right now, I'm recording this in the middle of November of 2020. So it is going to be administered online. The test consists of 2 subtests that you can take together or separately. The reading subtest is only multiple choice questions. There's 42 of them. I'll go into more depth about those in this video. And the second subtest is the writing subtest, which consists of 35 multiple choice questions, 7 short answer sentence correction items, and 2 open response assignments. I'm not going to talk about the writing subtest in this video, but stick with me and subscribe to this channel, because when I do record those, I consider that to really be my specialty. I feel equally prepared to help guide y'all through preparation for either of these subtests. But as far as writing goes, I teach a course called the Principles and Applications of Grammar, and there's lots of grammar stuff on the test. So I'm more than happy to help y'all prepare for that. So as far as these 2 subtests go, you have to take and pass both of them. Again, you can take them separately, costs more. I personally recommend taking them together, but you can look at my first video in this series linked below for more information about that strategically. So let's start with some information about standardized tests, what you can and can't expect from the MTEL. Standardized tests are the worst, right? They are tedious, they're stressful. Lots of people have anxiety around taking them, but I want to reassure you of some facts, right? They cannot, these tests, and the MTEL in particular, they cannot and do not measure how good a student you are, how good a teacher you're going to be, how prepared you are to teach, how smart you are, how worthy of love you are. None of those things, right? Those are not going to be evaluated on the test. They cannot be, right? The Common Literacy Test is supposed to measure your communication and literacy skills. In their words, they want to know that you have, quote, the appropriate level of knowledge and skills judged to be important for educators in Massachusetts public schools. So they figure that a baseline of preparation for teaching is that you should be able to communicate in oral and written forms effectively in order to teach, right? So that's what they're intended to evaluate. That's not really what they evaluate. They only can measure how good you are at taking standardized tests. That's all they can do. That's all they will do, right? Now, the good news is, though, that taking standardized tests well is a skill that, at least when it comes to the MTEL, you can practice and you can get better at, right? So these are the common problems when it comes to taking any standardized test. You are limited as far as how much time you have to take them. You are going to feel rushed. You will feel compelled to skip questions or skip sections, and you're going to encounter questions that are unclear or confusing. Because there are all of these limitations, you're going to find some prep materials, maybe not for the MTEL, but for other types of standardized tests, the ACT, the SAT, whatever it may be, that will tell you what appear to be shortcuts, right? For example, some people will say, if you have a question that requires you to read a reading passage, don't read the passage, go straight to the questions, right? They will tell you some shortcuts, some tips and tricks. Now, I'm going to give y'all test taking strategies, but I'm not going to give you shortcuts because I don't think that they work. They're not a good long-term plan for something that requires you to practice and develop skills, right? They're not the way to get a better score on the MTEL in my experience. The best approach is to be familiar enough with the test and with your own strategies that you answer questions correctly. And there's just not a shortcut for that in a lot of senses, right? So here's the good news. The MTEL is a very predictable test. Once you learn the patterns and the types of questions that the MTEL asks you, because there's a finite amount of information on the test, you'll become more comfortable with the questions and you'll become more comfortable with answering the questions correctly, right? Okay, so there are 6 types of questions on the reading subtest, which is what we were talking about today. The meaning of words and phrases, main idea and supporting details, writer's purpose and point of view, relationship among ideas, critical reasoning, and finally, outlining, summarizing, and graph interpretation. And as you can see, the approximate test weighting for each of those multiple choice categories is that each category is worth about 17% of the total of 100% on the reading subtest, right? So for those of y'all who have reading comprehension problems, or for those of you that struggle with reading, particularly in timed formats, there's some bad news. The entire subtest is multiple choice questions about passages. So it's going to give you 5 paragraph passages and then ask you to answer multiple choice questions about those passages, right? So the whole subtest is multiple choice, so you have to get really comfortable with eliminating wrong answer options. So I have a method, again, it's not a shortcut, it's a strategy that I believe is the best way to give yourself a better shot at choosing the right answer, all right? So this is the method that we're gonna practice today. And I wasn't a math major, but this I think should check out. If you encounter a question that you can't answer right away, if you can't answer it right away, that's great. You don't need the elimination method. But if you can't, then you have a 25% chance of getting it right if you guess, right? Because you have to choose between A, B, C, and D. You have 4 options. If you can eliminate one wrong answer, then you have a 33.3% chance of guessing the right answer, right? If you can eliminate 2 wrong answers, then you now have a 50% chance of getting the right answer. So every time you can eliminate a wrong answer option, you're giving yourself a better chance of guessing the answer correctly, right? And just being realistic, you are not going to know the answer to all of these. In some instances, you can narrow it down to 2 answer options, but you have no idea which one is right. Well, if you've narrowed it down, you've already given yourself a better shot, right? So how do we eliminate wrong answer options? Well, there are a few what I call distractors. These are wrong answers, and I want to help you learn to identify them. One type of wrong answer is the too specific answer. So these are wrong answers that are too specific for the nature of the question, right? The passage will be about some big grand idea or some abstract concept, and it will ask you the main idea, and one of the answer options will be something really specific. Well, something really specific is not a main idea, so you can probably get rid of that, right? So we'll look at those types. There are also what I call answers that are too brainy. They sound right because they're complicated and they use big words, but they're not right, right? And these are relying on you not reading the passage carefully. They are relying on you not paying attention. That's what they prey on, right? So we have to stay alert as we take the test. And then the last type of wrong answer option is the irrelevant answer. They're answers that are not relevant to the passage at all. They sometimes will use language that appears in the passage, so it will look familiar, but it's wrong, right? So we're going to adapt to seeing these type of wrong answers on the exam. So again, the reading subtest revolves around the passage. The passage is 5 paragraphs long. The paragraphs are numbered, and some questions will point you to particular paragraphs. For example, it will say, which of these answer options best describes the point of, the main idea of paragraph 3 or something along those lines, right? Are these going to be thrilling, scintillating, interesting reading passages? Absolutely not. They are not going to be interesting. In fact, what the test will usually do, because it is trying to trip you up, will ask you to read passages that are really, really dry and really boring. Why do they do that? Because they want to evaluate how well you are paying attention and how well you can assess the main idea of something that is profoundly uninteresting, right? So they are trying to trip you up. They are not trying to be your friends. So in that regard, you're not going to see something that is just, the most thrilling thing you've ever seen. So be prepared for that. So I want to walk you through the different types of questions asked on the reading subtest. So the first type of questions that you'll be asked about in regard to passages will be the meaning of words and phrases. How do they ask this? Well, the first and most common way is they will ask you the definitions of words in context. Why does that matter? Well, because the definition of the word might not be what they're asking you for. They might be asking you for that word's meaning in a particular context, right? So the good news about that is that it's also not really a straightforward vocabulary test, because you have some information. You have contextual information where they're asking you to understand the meaning of the word through context clues, right? That's good news for you, I promise. As a note, the words in question, are always underlined, both in the question stem, that's this part right here, and in the actual passage. So this is a sample of one of those types of questions. Which of the following words best defines cisterns in paragraph 3 of the passage? We're going to actually come back to this. I just wanted to familiarize you with what these question types look like, right? Okay. They will also ask you about the synonyms of words in context, or words that are, quote, closest in meaning. So here's an example of that. Which of the following words is the best synonym for the word governing as it is used in paragraph 5 of the passage? I know that most of you already know this, but let's review it anyway. Why not? A synonym is a word that exactly or very nearly shares a meaning with another word. So some examples are rich and wealthy, costly and expensive, tired and sleepy. When you get down to the nuts and bolts of it, do tired and sleepy mean exactly the same thing always? Not really, but the MTEL is never going to go that far to trick you. They're going to go with something that is a pretty obvious synonym or a pretty obvious antonym. An antonym is the exact opposite of a synonym. It is a word that does not at all share the meaning with the word in question. I'll show you. So this is another way you'll be asked this on the MTEL. Here's a question. Which of the following words is the best antonym for the word overarching as it is used in paragraph 1 of the passage? Then it gives you some answer options, right? The trick for these is the reason you have to look back at the passage is, and we'll see an example of this shortly, the version of the word that is used in the passage might not be exactly the same as what you see, or excuse me, let me rephrase that. Words can have different meanings, and it might not be asking you for the primary definition of the word. So you want to go back and look at what that word might mean in context, okay? So we'll go back and talk about that when we look more specifically at these answer questions. But An antonym is a word with a definition that is the opposite of another word, right? So kind and mean, shy and outgoing, easy and difficult. These are opposites, right? Again, the good news is this is not a pure vocabulary test. They're not just going to ask you, what is a cistern? And then you have to answer it. It's always going to be contextual clues, contextual information. And I'm sure that a lot of you had to do an exercise like this in middle school or high school or college, where you had to guess the meaning of a word based on context clues. This is a really critical reading comprehension skill, right? So let's return to that question about cisterns, question 13. Which of the following words best defines cisterns in paragraph 3 of the passage? I am going to take us back to the paragraph 3 so that we can kind of analyze this. So I am going to tell y'all that you have to read the whole passage. I'm sorry to say, but just for the sake of practicing these meaning of words and phrases questions, I want us to go back and look at the word in its context, right? So this is the paragraph in question. Urban sponges are taking many forms. A cluster of buildings at the City University of Hong Kong has rooftop gardens that soak up rainwater and provide half the toilet water used in the buildings. Gross. No, it's actually amazing. It's really fascinating, good for them, but also just toilet. That's always funny. Permeable paving stones are another form of sponge. In Shenzhen, China, they're being used to prevent a plaza from flooding. In Los Angeles, a city with chronic water shortages and heavy flooding when it does rain, planners turned a neighborhood street into a kind of sponge by installing permeable walkways and bioswales. Do you remember that I told y'all that one of their strategies is that they're trying to get you to not pay attention? They're trying to bore you to death. Do you see that that's happening here? Because this is really not interesting unless you're interested in, engineering or city planning or environmental issues. Maybe you are, but in general, your just average test taker is going to have a hard time paying attention here. And that's part of the strategy of the test writers, right? The bioswales are essentially shallow ditches built adjacent to the neighborhood street that are filled with drought-resistant plants. When it rains, water collects in the bioswales and filters down into cisterns. In an average year, this system collects enough water to provide for the needs of the families living on the street. Great. From what I just read you, we can start to guess the meaning of that word cisterns in this context, okay? Rainwater collects into a bioswale, whatever that is, and then filters into a cistern. And that cistern is the last, whatever that is the last step in a system that collects water to provide for families, right? At the end of this whole process is some kind of a collection area, right? That's what we can gather from this. The water is soaked up and then kind of redirected into these cisterns, right? So let's look back at question 13. Which of the following words best defines cisterns in paragraph 3 of the passage? We're looking for something where the end goal is collection. Does a river collect and hold things so you can distribute it? No, we can eliminate rivers. This is just counting on you not paying attention when you read the passage, seeing something that has to do with water and selecting it, right? Answer A is not it. B, trenches. I think we have there a little bit of a distractor, but a trench is not something that is deliberately constructed in order to hold something for later use, right? For distribution. So let's leave B as sort of a maybe. Tanks, hey, that sounds good to me, right? A tank is something that holds particular amounts of usually water, right? In order for its later use. So I'm holding on to tanks also. Holes, no. Holes, I think we can agree here that the rainwater does not filter down into holes. That's not a device which can hold something, right? But we have trenches and tanks. If I'm thinking about something, again, that is intended to, if we look back here, collect enough water to provide for the needs of families, I'm going with tanks, right? Which happens to be the right answer here. Now, do I have the benefit of knowing the right answer to this question? I definitely do. But what I just walked you through was my thought process while I was answering this question the first time, right? So let's look at another one of these. And this is where the dictionary definition of a word is not going to help you necessarily. Again, this is not a pure vocabulary test, but also just because you know the word doesn't mean it's the right definition in this context, okay? So look at this question. This is from a different passage. Which of the following words is closest in meaning to the word intellectual as it is used in paragraph 3 of the passage? If I don't go back to the passage, I'm in trouble here. Because if somebody asked me this question, you know, out of context and said, which one of these words is the closest in meaning to the word intellectual, I would choose A, smart. Would y'all agree? You can't answer me. I'm so used to teaching via Zoom. This asynchronous thing is confusing me. That would be, I think, what most people would choose. Like if someone is intellectual, they're smart, right? An intellectual pursuit is a pursuit of the mind, yeah? But let's look at paragraph 3 of this passage. Part of the reason for this lies in how intellectual property has been handled in the comic book industry. For decades, artists and writers were only paid on a page-by-page basis, and it was common practice for comic book publishers to retain control of any characters created by the artists and writers working for them. We don't even have to continue. If you've heard that term, intellectual property, you automatically know what this means, but just look at how it's discussing this, right? The type of property being described here is intellectual property, and what they're talking about is what artists and writers create, what they create and what they publish. And how would you describe that? I'd say B, creative, right? So we don't have to go much further in this process. And options C and D are distractors, right? D is probably the closest to the answer in this regard, but it's, again, the MTEL is not going to make it more complicated than it needs to be in this instance. Creative is the correct answer here, right? So you see, though, that if I went with my impulse with the word intellectual, I would get this question wrong, yeah? Okay, so that's it for vocabulary. In future videos, I'm going to go over more passages like this and more examples of this, but the best way to prepare for those kinds of questions is practicing understanding the meaning of words based on context clues, right? And sometimes you'll need more context than others. Sometimes you'll need the whole paragraph. Sometimes you'll just need a sentence. It just depends, right? Which brings me to the next section, which is the next type of question on the reading subtest, main ideas and supporting details. These types of questions ask about the main idea of each passage, right? Here's an example of that kind of question. Which of the following statements best summarizes the main point of the passage? And then we have 4 options. We're gonna, come back to this, but this applies to the last passage that we were looking at, or the one before that. Anyway, how do we answer questions like this? How do we identify the main idea of a passage? The best way is to read the passage, right? That's the best way to answer the main idea questions. There are some other techniques, though. I know how difficult it is to read and retain information during a high stakes, high stress, timed exam. It sucks, and I know that. So what do? You develop a strategy, or I recommend developing a few strategies. I would have a strategy for a passage that you are able to easily read. Maybe it's a topic that you're interested in. Maybe it's a topic you know a lot about. That's going to require less effort. And more importantly, you should have a strategy for a passage that you would struggle to read, a passage that is boring, a passage that, let's say you're like me and are averse to math and science. I think they're fascinating. I just struggle with them. I would want to have a different test-taking strategy for approaching those types of questions, those types of passages, right? So what do? Here's what I recommend. Number 1, practice, practice, practice. There's not a whole lot of MTEL test prep stuff available online. There's just not. That's one of the reasons why you're here. But the good news is any standardized test reading comprehension question is going to allow you to practice this skill. So look for those, right? I've suggested before that some students study and practice with SAT practice tests, and there are tons of those, right? So the first thing you're going to have to do is, yes, read the passage. Why? You're going to have to do that no matter what. If you do what some of these test prep tips and tricks people tell you to do, and you just go right to the questions, you're going to have to go back to the passage anyway. So I just recommend getting used to the rhythm of reading one of these passages, right? Find a strategy that works for you for doing an initial read through. Then you'll return to the passage for specific questions. So here's what you can do. You can read the first and last paragraphs more carefully than others. Why? Well, think about what's included in the first and last paragraphs of anything. The first is an introduction where they lay out what they're going to be talking about and explain kind of the overarching ideas. And then in the last paragraph, they're usually summing up or driving home main points. So you would want to look at those more carefully if you are asked to read for a main idea, which you are on almost every single passage. Then you'd want to skim the middle paragraphs because you might have to come back to them, right? Just for the sake of saving time. Again, this is all after an initial thorough read through. Another thing you can do, I've given you an example of this here in my horrible handwriting, is to read and take notes. So no matter what environment you're taking the MTEL in, you will be able to use scratch paper. Or sometimes if you're taking a proctored in-person exam, you'll be able to take notes on the computer. But so I would suggest, and this is just a good reading comprehension skill in general, to write, if this works for you, to kind of translate the meaning or the main idea of each paragraph into your own words and write notes about it on the side of the page. If you can get this technique down, it really helps for active critical reading. It helps you to process these ideas more thoroughly and engage with them more thoroughly. There's also this tactile element, where if you're having to physically write and you are having to actively understand those ideas well enough to explain them in your own words, that likely means that you'll be able to answer the questions really quickly. But of course, the drawback to this is that it takes a while, and it might take you a while to develop the ability to do this quickly, and then it just might not be worth it, right? We just want to get rid of the MTEL and get it away from us. But if you are used to doing this, it can be a great strategy. So here's an example of what I did here. This is going back to the city sponge passage. Managing water flow, supply, and quality is a major urban challenge in the 21st century. Much of the fresh rainwater that falls on a city goes down the drain, a lost opportunity for improving water security for the city's population. And all too often, on its way to the drain, rainwater floods streets and buildings, causing destruction and picking up pollutants that it carries into local rivers and bays. To develop systems that collect rainwater, some planners are drawing on knowledge of nature's own processes. So I wrote in my little notes, securing water supply for a populated area is a challenge, managing rainfall specifically. So people have looked to natural processes for ideas. That is just kind of in my own words, how I understood the main idea of that passage. The benefit of that is that if I am asked to give, for example, the main idea of that paragraph, I already know it. If I am asked to go back and look at, as we'll see later, if I'm asked to outline the ideas in the paragraph, I will have a much better understanding of them to do that more quickly, right? So that is the first paragraph of that passage, by the way. You see the first and last passage are important. This is the last passage of the paragraph of that passage. Transforming cities into sponges requires new approaches to urban design and major investment to build systems that accommodate water rather than shed it. But as urban populations continue to grow, capturing rainwater becomes increasingly important. So let's look at the inevitable main idea question about this passage, based only on paragraphs 1 and the last paragraph. Which of the following statements best summarizes the main points of the passage? A, examples of new and innovative water retention systems are appearing in urban areas all over the world. B, to address the significant issue of water retention in urban areas, many planners are designing systems that absorb water rather than shed it. C, the primary need for water retention systems in urban areas is that urban populations continue to grow. Or D, a combination of design elements used to retain water in urban areas is likely to be more effective than one design element. Right off the bat, just reading this out loud, we can get rid of options C and D. Why? They are too specific, even just based on reading those two paragraphs that we just looked at, the first and last paragraphs. Those are too specific. The idea of a growing urban population was not the main focus of either one of those paragraphs. It's not the main idea of the passage, right? And the idea of design elements being more effective, one design element being more effective than the other, it's too specific, right? It's not going to be a main idea type answer in a passage where we just saw that the main idea is not related to those two particular things, right? So look at A and B, because I feel like these are both good answer options. Examples of new and innovative water retention systems are appearing in urban areas all over the world. Well, we know that that's true. We saw that discussed, but we are not, it's not getting at the main thrust of the paragraph, right? That answer option B that says that water retention is in fact an issue, right? And that many planners are designing different types of systems to absorb water rather than to shed it. I mean, look at the last paragraph. As urban populations continue to grow, capturing rainwater becomes increasingly important. Transforming cities into sponges requires new approaches to urban design that will help accommodate water rather than shed it. Hello, that's looks like answer option B to me, right? But you see why answer options C and D are seductive answer options if you're not paying attention, because growing population was mentioned in that last paragraph and design elements were mentioned, but they're not the primary focus of the whole passage, right? So the answer to this one is B. So the third type of question that you're going to be asked is the writer's purpose and point of view. The reason that they're asking you this is because in order to fully comprehend something that you're reading, you need to take the perspective of the author into account, right? And also guessing, for example, what the author feels about a particular issue based on what you've read, that's part of critical active reading, right? So here's an example. The author's main purpose in this passage is to A, take a position on Eleanor Ostrom's view about resource management, B, provide a brief history of resource management techniques, C, explain unique take, or D, express the need for effective resource management. We don't know because we haven't looked at the passage, but these are asking you for author's intention. This is also sort of a main idea question, but it is specifically asking you about why the author is writing what they're writing, right? Very closely tied to main idea. So once you read and understand for the main idea of a passage, you will better be able to understand the author's perspective. The author's point of view is related to the main idea, right? So the next type of question you're likely to see is a question about relationships among ideas. So here's one. Which of the following assumptions most influenced the author's argument in the passage? So it is asking you for ideas that are related to the main purpose of the passage that you're reading, right? And then the fifth and last type of question is critical reasoning. This is asking you to do sort of a more in-depth, critical, analytical look at the passage. Who wrote the passage? What is the author's position toward the issue? Are they talking about it factually, or do they write from a more opinionated perspective? An example of this is this question. Which of the following statements best evaluates the author's objectivity in the passage? Objectivity is your ability to look at something without having an opinion about it, right? So that brings me to a little bonus type of question that you see a lot in these types of passages. You see these a lot on the MTEL. These are questions asking you to distinguish between fact and opinion. Here's an example. Which of the following statements from the passage expresses an opinion rather than stating a fact? We haven't read the passage that these questions are about, but let's look at them anyway. A, and the late 19th century was a time when much needed to be reformed. B, on one occasion, she posed as a maid for a story on employment agencies that took advantage of poor, uneducated women. C, not all of Bly's stories advanced the crusade against injustice and corruption. Or D, nevertheless, championing, the cause of poor working women was a prominent theme in Bly's reporting. There's only one of these answer options where the author is giving you his or her own evaluation of the situation, his or her own thoughts about what was going on, and that is answer option A. The late 19th century was a time when much needed to be reformed. That is not, the idea of whether or not something should be changed requires some evaluative judgment. You have to determine whether something is good or bad if it needs to be reformed, right? Think about any of the controversial issues of the day. If I said, for example, no, immigration doesn't need to be reformed, I'm giving you a value judgment about that issue, right? We don't need to reform campaign financing. Well, that's a matter of opinion, I would say, right? For the rest of these, someone posed as a maid for a story on unemployment agencies. No, I think what they're going for in answer option B is to distract you with this situation took advantage of poor, uneducated women. That's not, but the author is not offering any kind of an evaluation of whether or not this is good or bad. It's just describing what she did, right? Answer option C, not all of Bly's stories were part of the crusade against injustice and corruption. That's just talking about what the stories are about. I don't have any idea how the author feels about it. And then last, championing the cause of poor working women was a prominent theme. Just pointing out that something is a theme is not offering your opinion, your evaluative opinion on it, right? When you see questions like this, I want you to consider, is that answer option saying that something is good or bad, right? That's what evaluating is, essentially, if we want to really boil it down. Is something good or bad? Is it positive or negative? And answer option A is the only one I see that's doing that here, right? Okay, the last type of reading question that you will see, so just to recap, we looked at critical reasoning, relationships among ideas, writer's purpose and point of view, main ideas and supporting details, and words and their meaning. So the last type of question, and honestly, these are pretty rare. You don't see these very often, right? But these are questions that are going to ask you for how you would best outline the main topics addressed in the passage. So it is asking you to identify in what order main themes happen in the passage. My little trick where I took notes about the main idea of each paragraph, that would really come in handy here, because then you could essentially just look at the ones that most closely line up with your notes, right? And this is another type of question. These are really unusual. This will give you a graph or a chart or some graphical representation of data and then ask you a question about it. So this is a chart of the changing population structure in Japan between 1950 and 2000, and then a projection of population in the year 2050. And you have this question accompanying it. Information presented in the population pyramids best supports which of the following conclusions. So we would be expected to look at this graph and learn something from it, right? Well, this is just basically testing your literacy when it comes to the graphic representation of data or mathematical information, right? It's testing your ability to read a chart and to read it quickly. And let's look at the axes of this graph and what we're being asked to do. So, oh my God, can you tell that I can't remember if this is the X or Y axis? Oh my God, I'm just gonna say X, right? I hope I'm right. As you can see here, this represents ages between 0 and 90, right? This Y axis is the population in millions, right? So as we can see, looking at 1950, it looks like the younger population represents a much bigger part of the population in 1950, and that the number of younger people in proportion to older people is slowly shrinking as the year 2000 comes along, right? You can see that it looks like the birth rate is going down because there are fewer people under the age of 10, right? In proportion to the population. And it looks like people are living longer, right? If you look up at this part of this graph, you can see that this section, people who are between the ages of like 40 and 80 seems to be widening, right? And if we look at 2050, how could we describe these changes? Everything looks like it's kind of leveling out, right? Now there's these top kind of like between the ages of 80 and 90 or so that seem like they're also growing, but just not quite as much in proportion to the rest of it. But it looks like we're seeing kind of a leveling off, right, of the distribution of different age groups in the population being a little bit more even, right? Okay, so let's go back to this question. Information presented in the population pyramids best supports which of these conclusions? A, by 2050, the proportion of people over 65 in Japan is projected to be more than 6 times greater than it was a century earlier. B, an imbalance in the proportion of males and females in the Japanese population has been a major cause of population decline. Let me tell you, absolutely not. They're not asking you about that, right? They're not, it's too specific, and this chart cannot show us cause, right? That's not what we're looking for. This is looking at trends and projected trends. It is not arguing for a cause of anything. C, by 2050, a substantial proportion of government spending in Japan. Does this graph say anything about government spending? No, get rid of it. C is gone. D, the proportion of Japanese in the national workforce is projected to begin growing at some point in the next. Does this say anything about workforce? No, get rid of it. The answer option is A, right? Easy peasy. What we saw in those answer options is not relevant to what we can learn from the pyramid just based on looking at this, right? Okay, so the answer is A. The proportion of people over 65 is projected to be more than 6 times greater than it was essentially earlier. Yeah, looks good to me, right? Okay, so this is another example of a type of question related to outlining, summarizing, and interpreting graphs. This is a question related to how you could best represent information in a text, how you could best sort of convert it to a graphic format, right? So this question is, which of the following graphic formats would best be used to present information contained in the passage? Pie chart, flow chart, horizontal bar graph, or timeline? Well, this depends on what they're asking you, what type of information it is. A pie chart will show you a circle, right? And show you what proportion of the whole is accounted for by different categories, right? So imagine, for example, I'm going to pull up a pie chart that has to do with military spending or spending in the US. Okay, so I'm pulling this up. Let's see. Actually, we don't even have to go to spending. Let's look at personal spending, right? We don't even have to look at governmental stuff. Let's stay away from that. I don't think anybody will mind. Here is a pie chart for making a spending plan. So the idea is that this entire pie is all the money that you make, right? This is all of your income from every source. And you see each little slice of the pie here represents a portion of your total spending, right? So that's the kind of thing that a pie chart would come in handy for. So there's that. Now let's look at our other options here. We have flow chart. A flow chart is best for describing processes, right? Or graphically representing processes. So let me show you what that might look like. A flow chart, as you can see here, this is what you could do if your lamp doesn't work. You could follow a flow chart, right? Let's take a look here. If your lamp doesn't work, what can you do? Is the lamp plugged in? No, you can plug it in. Is it plugged in? Yeah. Is the bulb burned out? No. If not, you need to fix it. If the bulb is burned out, you replace the bulb, right? So flow charts are best for describing processes, yeah? The next option, as you can see, I'll close this out, is a horizontal bar graph. So those would be graphs that, I mean, horizontal bar graphs can represent data in a number of ways, but it can show the proportion of different data in relation to other types of data. It can show you growth. It can show you all kinds of different information, right? So horizontal bar graph is a lot more wiggle room. And then last would be a timeline, right? Showing the beginning and ending points of a particular time period and giving you an idea of when events happened in a sequence related to other events. So when it comes to a question like this, it really depends on what type of information they're asking you to graphically represent, right? If it's a pie chart, it's looking for portions of a whole. If it's a flow chart, it's looking for processes. If it's a horizontal bar graph, depends, right? Usually, I don't know, amounts, totals, growth, this sort of thing. And if it's a timeline, it's asking you to describe sequences of events, right? Okay, so let's give this a try more holistically with a sample passage, right? This is a passage about, of all wonderful things, rainbows. So we're going to read this together. If you do just want to go straight to the questions, or if you want to pause this and read it on your own, that's totally fine, but I'm going to read it out loud. Does a rainbow point the way to a pot of buried gold as claimed in popular folklore? I'm going to go ahead and tell you guys the answer is probably no, but you know, I want to believe. Or is it the multicolored serpent some people in Australia, Asia, and Brazil see streaking across the sky? I can't judge that. Others see a rainbow as a heavenly bridge connecting this world and the world beyond. Among Arabs and some Bantu in Central Africa, it is the bow for God's arrow. To early Christians, it was the throne of Christ. And among the Nandi, Maasai, and California Yuki, it is the robe of God. To 21st century scientists, it's something quite different. For them, the band of soft colors that arcs across the sky simply shows the spectrum of colors in sunlight spread out by raindrops. All right, let's pause after paragraph 1. If I were to summarize this in my own words, I would say rainbows have lots of different cultural significance for people and cultures all over the world, different meanings, different significance. Contemporary scientists see the color spectrum, right? Okay. Paragraph 2. How does it happen? Perhaps the best place to begin, by the way, pause, just as an editorial comment. If any of the writers of the MTEL are watching this, one of the things that y'all are going to test on your writing subtest of your little MTEL is clarity in writing and clear pronoun reference. I hate this unclear pronoun it. What are you talking about? It, the rainbow? Tell me that. How do rainbows happen? Anyway, don't be hypocrites. How does it happen? Perhaps the best place to begin is by understanding that sunlight is white light. Although white light contains colors, they are blended together. No color is visible until the light strikes an object. When that occurs, the object struck reflects one or more colors in the light while absorbing or refracting the others. The reflected light is the color the object appears to be when viewed with the human eye. Whereas solid objects send unabsorbed colors back to the eye, transparent objects such as glass or water bend the light as it passes through them. This bending is called refraction. A rainbow is caused by drops of water that both refract and reflect the light rays that enter them. Main idea of this passage, I would say they are talking about the relationship between color and light and how light helps to communicate information about color to the eye, right? It seems to be a good description. And the idea of refraction seems to be important in this paragraph. 3. Of the two processes, refraction plays a particularly important role in the formation of rainbows. When light is refracted, each color is bent at a slightly different angle. As a result, the colors in the light separate. As it is then that the eye sees the spectrum of light we call a rainbow. In the spectrum, red light bends the least and violet bends the most. Orange, yellow, green, and blue, always in that order, remember Roy G. Biv, range between them. Hence, a rainbow is red along the top and violet on the inner side of the arc. In every rainbow, whether caused by sunlight striking raindrops high in the sky or water dripping from a garden hose in the backyard, the colors appear in exactly the same order. If we were going to summarize this, I would say it seems to be the important element here is how refraction and how the bending of different colors in the light spectrum controls the order in which you see them, right? So in that regard, the amount of bending done by refraction in the rainbow bends, the amount of bending dictates the order in which they appear, that they always appear in the same order no matter where the rainbow is colored coming from, right? Paragraph 4, we're almost done. Rainbows appear only when the viewer is between the sun and the moist air. They are therefore most often seen early or late in the day when the sun is low and there is rain in the area of the sky toward which the sun is shining. Each point on a rainbow is caused by the interaction of sunlight with a different drop of water. Sometimes only a short length of color is visible, which means that no drops of water are in adjacent areas in the sky. We have an underlined word there, so we know they're going to ask us the meaning. If I were going to summarize this, I would say that where you are in relation to the sun and the moist air, because we know that that's necessary to refract the light, determines whether or not we see the rainbow. And that each point is a result of the interaction between water and sunlight. And so it seems like it's important that only a short length of color is visible. Okay, and then paragraph 5, as to the pot of gold, even if such a treasure were buried at the end of the rainbow, it could never be found. That's sad. Any effort to discover this treasure is doomed to failure. Whenever a viewer moves underneath the drops that form a rainbow, it disappears. Rainbows exist only when the positions of the light rays, the raindrops, and the observer align in the proper angles. When the angles change, the spectrum of visible color vanishes. Okay, so we have a little bit of an illusion there in paragraph 5 based on where you are in relation to the rainbow. So it's going to change and move so you can't physically find the end of it, right? Okay, great. Let's look at the questions. 7 is going to take us right back to the passage. We're going to go right back to the 4th paragraph where we saw that word adjacent. Which of the following words is the best meaning of adjacent as it is found in the 4th paragraph of the passage? What do you know about the word adjacent when you normally encounter it? Sometimes this can help. Normally that means something right next to, right? Something close by. So I want to say B here, but let's go back to the passage just in case. I'm going to read a couple of sentences around it. Each point on a rainbow is caused by the interaction of sunlight with a different drop of water. Sometimes only a short length of color is visible, which means that no drops of water are in adjacent areas of the sky. Well, if we have to have water in order to see it, if there is a short length of color, that must mean that there's no more nearby water in order to refract light, right? That'd be my guess. So I think this is a fairly straightforward one, that adjacent here means nearby, right? I think that the other answer options are depending on maybe you rushing through that last paragraph, right? But the answer there is nearby. I think that's a fairly easy one. So let's look now at question 8, which is a question about main ideas. Specifically, though, it's not asking the main idea of the entire passage. It's asking you for the main idea of paragraph 2. We already looked at paragraph 2, but let's go back and look at it again. So my memory of this question is that it is basically explaining the phenomenon of refraction, right? It's discussing what happens when white light, which doesn't have a specific color in and of itself, but is a blend of different colors, interacts with objects, whether they are, transparent objects or solid objects, and what happens to the color in the process. All of this is building up to the idea that a rainbow is caused by drops of water that refract and reflect the light, right? All that builds up to that last sentence. So that tells us how this is all relevant to the study of rainbows, right? Because we know that that's our focus here. So going back to this main idea of the paragraph question, let's look at the options. A, although white light contains colors, they're blended together. No color is visible until the light strikes an object. That is, in fact, in the passage, right? All of these are in the passage. These are statements from the paragraph. It's in the paragraph, but it doesn't express the main point of that paragraph. Why is this paragraph here? What does it want us to know? Does it want us to understand refraction or information about light and objects and the human eye just for the hell of it? No, this whole passage is about rainbows, right? So whatever answer option we choose, it should be the main idea of a paragraph somehow relates to the main idea of the passage, right? I like to think of these as sort of branching trees, wherein the purpose of the whole passage is the most important part. It's at the top. The main idea of each paragraph is next in line, and those all support the main idea of the passage. And then you have supporting details around the bottom, right? So all of this information in this paragraph is geared toward helping us better understand what is going on with rainbows and how they're created. So if you look at an option like B, the reflected light is the color the object appears to be viewed with when viewed with the human eye. Again, it's not the main idea of the paragraph because the main point of the paragraph is explaining all this information as it relates to rainbows, right? So B's not it. C, we're getting closer. Whereas solid objects send unabsorbed colors back to the eye, transparent objects such as glass or water bend the light as it passes through them. Now, that's important to the passage. It's important to the idea of how color is viewed and what happens to it when it hits water or glass. But option D is the only one that brings us back to rainbows, right? That it's caused by drops of water that both refract and reflect the light rays that enter them. It's kind of the summary of everything that it told us about what refraction is and why it matters. And importantly, it connects to the main idea of the paragraph and the passage. And remember the first sentence in this passage, how does it happen? How does a rainbow happen? Well, it just told us, right? So that reflects the main idea of that paragraph. Yeah. Okay. So what about question 9 then? Here's where we need to find the main idea of the whole shebang. Which of the following phrases best describes the author's main purpose in the passage? Why are they writing this? Is it to inspire us to go to Ireland and look for the pot of gold at the end of a rainbow? Is it encouraging us to think about the box of Lucky Charms differently? Is it asking us to make a wish? No, this author is informing us of something, right? We know that, but we basically need to figure out what it's informing us of. So let's look at the answer options. A, to explore the significance of rainbows in various cultures. No, that is addressed in the first paragraph, but it is definitely not the main purpose of the passage. If it is, then why does the author bring it up and then drop it like a hot potato after one paragraph, right? No. B, to analyze a popular fable about rainbows. There's no fable here. B is not it. C, to describe how rainbows are formed and appear to the human eye. All right, that sounds a little bit closer to reality to me, right? D, to examine the spectrum of colors revealed in rainbows. No, that's a little bit too specific. That is maybe an element of this that is discussed, but answer option C is the only one that really sums up the entire purpose here, which is to talk to us about how the human eye perceives rainbows, right? So the answer to question 9 is C. 10. According to information presented in the passage, all rainbows are red along the top because the color red, we remember this, right? We saw this in one of these paragraphs that we can now go back to. A, red is more visible to the eye than other colors in the rainbow. B, is refracted less than other colors in the rainbow. C, is both refracted and reflected by the water in the rainbow. Or D, is the brightest of the different colors in the rainbow. Based on my memory of this, I'm going to go ahead and eliminate A and D. I don't remember red being discussed as being more visible or brighter, right? But let's go back to the paragraph where this is talked about and see if we can get a sense of it. Let's see. In the spectrum, red light bends the least and violet light bends the most. Okay, so red, it says, it bends the least, so it refracts, the least, because we know that when light is refracted, colors bend at different angles, right? Hence, a rainbow is red along the top and violet on the inner side of the arc. Okay, so based on my understanding of that, I'm ready to go back to the question. That it is refracted, less than other colors in the rainbow, right? Based on what I read, because as we can see here, when light is refracted, each color bends differently, so the colors in the light separate. Red light bends the least, and violet light bends the most. So that's why we see rainbows red along the top. So something that bends the least is something that is refracted the least, right? So that's what's happening there. So the answer option B is correct. Number 11, which of the following facts best supports the author's contention that even if a pot of gold were buried at the end of the rainbow, it could never be found? A, when light is refracted, each of the colors in the light is bent at a slightly different angle. B, regardless of where a rainbow appears, the colors will always be in the same order. It's in the passage, but that's not that doesn't feel relevant. That's not why it can't be found. C, whenever a viewer moves underneath the rainbows that form raindrops that form a rainbow, it disappears. Remember that? Or D, each of the points on a rainbow is formed by the interaction of sunlight with a different drop of water. Okay, I can right away say C is what I remember from the passage, from talking about it, from summarizing it out loud. That's what I remember, and I'm definitely not a science person. And I know this is easy, but let's go back to that paragraph about trying to find the pot of gold. Any effort to discover this treasure is doomed to failure. Whenever a viewer moves underneath the drops that form a rainbow, it disappears. What we're going to see on the writing subtest is that this piece of punctuation here, the colon, basically stand for that is, or here's why, or here's the answer. The colon introduces basically the answer to a question or the items in a list. So it's basically saying any effort to discover this treasure is doomed to failure, and here's why. Whenever a viewer moves underneath the drops that form a rainbow, it disappears. So folks, my memory is correct. The answer to 11 is C, right? And here's the last one. I know this is very small and difficult to see, but this is which of the following lists best outlines the main topics addressed in the passage. Let me see actually if I can make this a little bit bigger so that it's easier to see. Okay. There we go. Okay, the folklore of rainbows. We know that's first. So we could even, if we know that's first, we can just eliminate answer options where that's not first, right? The fable of the pot of gold buried at the end of the rainbow. Eh, okay. Could we say that that's a main point of that of the passage, or of the that this is a main topic in the passage? Because that's what we're looking for, right? Which of the following best outlines the main topics addressed in the passage? I don't know if the fable of the pot of gold is a main point per se. I'm getting rid of B. What about C, the scientific definition of a rainbow? It's missing something. It's missing the folklore element, right? So I'm getting rid of C. This is just my quick way of doing this. D, pots of gold and multicolored serpents. Very specific, right? I'm going to say no to D. I'm just going to impulsively say A, just because I found something. I remember doing my outline. This one looks right. The folklore of rainbows, the formation and arrangement of colors in the rainbow. We remember that. C, when rainbows appear, why you can never see the end of one. That sounds like my understanding or my recollection of the passage, right? So here we just want to make sure that we understand the main topic addressed in the passage. The main topic should somehow connect to the main idea, right? And just looking even at these answer options and these other answers, the pots of gold and multicolored serpents are not main topics in this passage. They just aren't, right? The fable of the pot of gold is not a main topic. Even looking at some of these other ones, the different colors in a rainbow, that's important, but the formation and arrangement is a better way of expressing it as far as a main idea in the passage, right? So what I want y'all to practice doing between now and the next video is to find the sample MTEL that I'm going to link in the video below and practice just reading these passages and making notes about the main ideas that you notice in each paragraph. Then go to the questions and see if those notes don't help you to answer main idea and main topic questions. That's the practice that I would like you to embark on now. Okay. So I really appreciate y'all joining me today. Please stay tuned. The next video is going to be about the writing subtest. And then I'm going to make 2 new videos about the reading subtest and the writing subtest. So there will be a part 2 to the reading subtest and a parts 1 and 2 to the writing subtest. Thank y'all very much. If you have any questions for me, my contact information can be found below. And be well and happy studying.